Morning.
Morning.
So, it's good to see you this morning. Just to kind of get us warmed up and get us started, and I don't know, just for fun, I want to find out if you could pass your driver's test today. We're going to look at some road signs. You tell me what they mean. These are not trick questions, so don't worry about it. Drunk driver ahead. Okay. All right. Slippery when wet. Okay. If I need a ride, I'm gonna talk to you and not him. So just okay. Slippery when wet. What about this one? Oh. Two donuts. Cleveland, Alabama. What? A roundabout. Okay. Weirdest thing I've ever seen, but that's the trend of things. I guess so. That one got put in Cleveland. Rhonda just got in it and just kept going in circles. Until she saw a police officer there, and she said, "No, I better get out of this." So she was having fun with it anyway. So I don't know. I shouldn't have told her that. All right. What about this one? Huh? It's no median. You're entering a road with two-way traffic. Okay? You're entering a road with two-way traffic. All right. We may have to do some driver's license checks around here. I'm just saying. Just saying. Okay, come on. No U-turn.
As soon as possible.
Okay. No U-turn unless you think you can make it, right? All right, no U-turn. All right. One more. Construction ahead. Workers. Y'all are being politically correct or whatever. Men at work. But you can't say that because now it could be people at work. So, or workers. Okay, all right. So pretty good. So you may not know which direction to go, but you know when to be careful when there's somebody ahead, right? So we're doing pretty good with our road signs. Let me tell you something. Signs do have something to do with the lesson this morning. And I will get back to that and talk about that in just a few minutes. But before I do, I want to share a story with you. And I want you to listen to it very carefully. It's I think, a pretty good story, or I wouldn't be bothering to share it with you. A long, long time ago, there were some men and women who moved to a new land. And they got to this new land, and these were people who believed in God. They believed in Jesus as the Son of God. But there was no church in this new land. And not only did these people not have a church, they didn't have a preacher. They didn't have any religious leaders or anything to follow. They were just a group of people that moved to a new land, and they believed in God. Now, first of all, before I go further in the story, what would you do in that circumstance if that was you? If you moved to a new land and you found no church, but you believe in God, you believe in Jesus, what would you do? Find a different land, okay? Start a church, okay? So either run away or start a church, right?
There's one more answer. Sleep in on Sundays.
Sleep in on Sundays. Okay. All right. Because you were behind the drunk driver a little. Yeah, okay. All right. So, okay. All right. Now, picture the story. Again, this is a long time ago. People moved to a new land, and they were godly people, but there was no church. They had no preacher. They had no religious leader. They had nothing. So what they decided to do is just gather together and just study the Bible together. They didn't have to have a preacher. They just studied the Bible together, opened it and read it. It's amazing how you can do that. So they got together and they just studied the Bible. And pretty soon they were worshiping together on Sundays. And it's interesting, they dropped all of the religious names that they may have had in the past, any religious titles that they may have had. They dropped all these, and they simply became known as Christians. I guess because they had been studying their Bible. So they dropped all these names. They simply became known as Christians. These people started meeting together and worshiping as a church, and there were 82 of them. 82 of them that started out. Well, before long, they decided, we should just build a place to meet. I don't know where they were meeting before. Maybe at someone's house. I don't know. Maybe in a park. But they decided, let's just build a place that we can meet. And so things were rocking along pretty good, you would think, but things were not easy for these people. At one point, they were threatened. They were being threatened by the neighboring people there. In fact, it was so bad, they were threatened with death. They were afraid for their lives, and so they actually had to post guards outside the church building when they would meet to keep from being attacked. And so this was a really trying time for these new Christians or this new church. And so even though, and the interesting thing, even though they had been threatened, they had to post guards outside the church building and everything when they met to protect themselves, they grew from 82 people to 130 people. So rather than shrinking under those trying circumstances, they were growing. Very interesting, very interesting. Well, they went along for a while, and years later, a war broke out. And they were, many of the people in the church were killed in the war, had to go off to battle, things like that. And their church building was burned down. That could be really discouraging, couldn't it? Well, their building was burned down. Most of the members, the ones that weren't killed in war, scattered, at least for a while. But sometime later, they returned. They got back together and said, we need to get this thing back going again now that the war has kind of died down a little bit. And the war may have still been even going on some, but they decided to build it back up and try to get back together. And they rebuilt the congregation. They rebuilt the building eventually. And 5 years into that, after they had gotten back and returned, they were worshiping together. They slowly rebuilt the congregation together, and they were growing again. They were becoming stronger and stronger and more numbers. And they were just a strong group of people. They had a good base group of people in this group, in this church. That was a long time ago. And this church is still meeting today. They're still striving. They're still working together. They're striving to please God, to serve and worship God in spirit and in truth. Are you curious about where this was? Well, that brings me back to signs. I told you the signs were going to have something to do with this, okay? Last Saturday, Ron and I went up to Tennessee. When we were headed back, we were coming through Bridgeport, Alabama, and I noticed a sign that said, the oldest Church of Christ in the state. And I've seen it before. I've seen this building before, but it just kind of struck me. And so I stopped, and we went up the road to go to it. And inside of this building is a plaque that says, the oldest church in the state. It was established in 1807. Okay? So this church has been in existence for 216 years. I want you to think about this. It's been in existence 216 years. And just to kind of put things in perspective, the church, the congregation that I grew up, that I attended when I grew up, no longer exists. It's gone. Completely gone. I don't know all the reasons, but it just doesn't exist. They shut the doors. 216 years this church has been going on. Faithful men and women continue to work, and they started, over, like I said, over 200 years ago. And it kind of tells me something about the people that were in this church. It says a lot for the people in this church. And I just want to think about that for a few minutes and talk about that, because it really struck me. The way I told the story, I left out a few details. It's sort of like one of those Paul Harvey's The Rest of the Story. You didn't expect to see this in Alabama, did you? But this is exactly what happened. And I want to look and see what made them different. What made these people different? Why were they different? By the way, there's their building now after remodels or whatever. So there's their building. What made them different? First of all, they studied together. They worshiped together. Even though there were no churches in the area. In fact, Alabama had just become a territory. And they moved down from Alabama into Cherokee Indian territory. They had no preacher. They had no one person that was guiding people and prodding people to get going. They just sat down and studied together. Did you catch that a while ago when I was telling the story? They just said, hey, let's study the Bible together. And I can just imagine them sitting around back in the early 1800s, very early 1800s, and just kind of sitting around and saying, and not having any preacher or something, and they would just sit around and open the Bible and start reading with each other, studying with each other, discussing what they read. That was pretty amazing to me. There was nobody pushing them to lead them in one direction or another. They just simply looked at the Bible and saw what it said, and they dropped all of their previous names and said, we're just Christians. We're just Christians. They simply wanted to be, it was a group of people that simply wanted to be close to God. And they knew that strength would come from a group of people who were as one. You remember how many times Jesus prayed for the unity of the church? He prayed so many times for the unity of the church, and that is one of the things that we don't see very much, is unity in a church, or unity of the church. It has become so scattered. But they knew that this group of Christians could be one, and they were very strong. And when you're devoted like this to the Word of God, there's no way to stop you. When you're devoted like this, there's no stopping you. And that's one of the reasons that we talked so much in the early stages of our congregation here, our group, about devotion. We worked devotion half to death for a whole year. You probably got tired of hearing the word, devotion, being devoted. But it's so important. And you see the results. 216 years this church held together through all kinds of problems. Kind of reminds me of the story of Abraham. You remember Abraham. Abraham went to a new land, right? A land he didn't know anything about. He went to a new land. And this is kind of what happened. When he got to the new land, there was nobody there that worshiped God. There was nobody in the new land that knew God. He was in a new land, and the only people that knew or cared about God or worshiped God was him and his family. What did he do? You remember what he did? Listen to this. In Genesis chapter 12, beginning in verse 7, the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. What did Abraham do when he went to a new land? He didn't even think about it. He built an altar and worshiped God, right? He built an altar. It was as natural as breathing to him. It's like, this is just what I do. He never got to the new land and said, now what? Well, there's no church to go to. There wasn't any church in his time. There's no people that even believe in God here. What do I do? Give up? Worshiping God was like breathing air. He just had to do it. And so wherever he went, he would just build an altar and worship God. He started something big when he did that. And because he did that, you have to understand that the Lord was the center of Abraham's life. It wasn't just a side thing. It wasn't just something that he did once in a while or thought about once in a while. It wasn't something he did on Sundays, obviously. It was just, God was the center of his life. Everything he did, everything he thought, everything that he was centered around God. I mean, we really need. I really want us to kind of see that. And God blessed him for his devotion. There's that word again. He blessed him for his devotion. He made him the father of a nation. He allowed him to actually be an ancestor of his son Jesus. How cool is that? Abraham's focus was God. And it kind of reminds me of the story of the church up in North Alabama that we're talking about. Because we need to understand, God noticed, and we said this, God noticed the devotion of Abraham. You think he'll notice the devotion that we have? He apparently noticed the devotion of the people at, oh, by the way, Rocky Springs Church of Christ. He apparently noticed their devotion. They've been at it for 216 years, and they're still going. They're still going. I mean, they started a church. They started a spiritual work because there wasn't one there. There was none to be had. And my question is, can we be that devoted? Can we be that devoted? Something else I noticed when I was thinking about this, there's the passage, I forgot to put it up, there's the passage in Genesis. We've already read it, so we're going to move on. Something else that I noticed is that they were willing to risk everything, including their lives, to worship together. Would we be willing to do that? I mean, really? I mean, I really want you to think about it, because I want you to think, we look at the persecution of the church over in other countries, and we don't have to worry about that here. Just 200 years in Alabama, they were being threatened. And they were risking their lives to gather together. By the way, the people that were threatening them were the Cherokee Indians. They were living in their territory, and they had moved into the Cherokee Indian territory, and the Indians didn't like them being there. They just didn't. And so whenever they would meet together, they would have to protect themselves from these Indians. But they kept on meeting. They didn't let that stop them. It didn't matter what was going on outside. It didn't matter about outside influences. It didn't matter about the harm that could come to them, the death that could come to them. They were devoted to God. And it's really a good lesson to us. And I think, why? Why were they so devoted? What was it that they read? What was it that they saw in their study of the Bible? You remember they just gathered together in their study of the Bible. What was it that they saw that could have caused them to be so devoted that they would be willing to give up their lives in order to worship together. And I thought about that, and listen to this. In 1 John chapter 2, beginning in verse 15, it says, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world's passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever." According to this passage, what keeps people from loving the Lord as they should? What does it say? The love of the world, lust of the eyes, just pride of life. You know, just you think about that, just pride of life. We begin to appreciate and love all the stuff and the surroundings and things like that, and we forget about why we're here. And he says, look, all these passions, these desires, these things that the world offers, that people love the world and the pride of their physical life and what's going on in their lives and all this stuff and what they see, all that stuff is going to perish. It's the one who does the will of the Father that's going to last forever. We've got to remember that. We've got to understand it for what it really is. It's hard for us to picture that because we go out in the world and all we know is what's in this world. Because that's what we can see. And we're proud of what we've accomplished. We're proud of our lives. Things like that. And we forget all this stuff's going to be gone. None of it matters. The end of this verse says the world's passing away along with all of its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever. It seems that the people at this church that we're talking about, they love the Lord more than they love the world. If they lost they tried to protect themselves. They posted guards outside. They didn't want to die, but they were willing to. If that's what it took to meet together and worship God, they were willing to. It was that important. And they proved it by continuing to meet together, even though it was dangerous. See, the love of the Lord and the love of each other caused them to be willing to risk their lives, to work together and meet together. And I don't know, it's kind of my dream for us to be a church like this. Can we? Can we? We're lacking enthusiasm here. Can we?
Yes.
I mean, can we be a church like that?
Yes.
Not if we have a lack of enthusiasm. Not if we're not really serious about it. Not if we're just saying yes just because that's the answer that I'm looking for. We can be this. We can be this church. You know, I also noticed a couple of, another thing. Is that when disaster came, they didn't turn their backs on the Lord. They didn't turn their backs on their fellow Christians. These people obviously were like family, you know? And that's kind of the feel that I get here. They were like family. They cared about each other and really loved each other. You know, I think there's a reason. I think this is the reason that when the Bible talks about people who are Christians, they refer to each other as brothers and sisters. Because it's a family. It should be. It is. And I think that this church felt that way. It's a gathering of people who's committed to grow together, to work together, rather than separately, like a family. Let's look at another verse, Philippians chapter 2, beginning in verse 2. Paul says, "Complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord with and of one mind. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility, count others more significant than yourselves. Paul here wants the church at Philippi and Blountsville to be of the same mind, to be of one heart, to have humility. I mean, really think about what this means. For us to be of one mind, to have the same goals, the same beliefs in Jesus. He wants us to have the same love. Some people, sometimes it's easy to love someone. It's harder to love others. But we're a family. And it should be easier to love family. And so he wants us to, I really want us to think about what that means. He wants us to be of one accord, of one mind. He wants us to think of each other as more important, more significant than ourselves. To where we really care that much. Do we? I don't know. Do you think more of the people around you than you do of yourself? It's just something to think about. That's what it takes. That's what it takes. There's no such thing as those people down there. It's just us. It's us. We're one body. We're of one mind, of one heart, and we follow one Savior. It's just us. And we're in this together. That's why when war broke out, by the way, in our story of the church, that was the Civil War. When war broke out, it caused many of those people, their loved ones, to die. Many of these people in the church had to go off to war, and they didn't come back. Many of their loved ones died, and their church building got burned down in war. And they had no place to go, and because of the armies coming in and everything and the war that was going on, they ended up scattering. But only for a time. Only for a time. They returned and they rebuilt because they thought of each other as one. They had one mind, one goal, and they had to come back and be together and start this thing over and rebuild the congregation, rebuild the church. When I saw the sign, actually on the side of the road, the plaque is on the inside of the building that it talks about. But when I saw the sign that said that it was the oldest Church of Christ in the state of Alabama, it kind of intrigued me. And I saw that, so I Googled it and started researching it. And by the way, if you want to research it, there's a lot of good information. There's a lot more. There's names and dates and all kinds of more detail than what I'm giving here. But it's a fascinating story. It really is. But I got to thinking about it, and I was looking at that, and I thought, wow, we should talk about this. Because I don't know if you realize this, but this is our 4th anniversary as a church here. Actually, we started our first sermon at my house was on February 17th, 4 years ago. Today's the 19th. And I thought how fitting to look at the longevity of this church that went through so much. We haven't been through anything like that. But would we endure it? Would we endure that? Would we still be together? We're only 4 years in. They're 216 years in. And they're still going. You're still going. And I would like to think that even that 216 years from now, even though none of us will probably be here, I'm pretty sure. Would there be things remembered about what we did so that this church in Blountsville is still going 216 years later? Or is just a passing cool idea that'll last for a few years? Well, it's lasted for 4 and we're still growing a little bit, right? We're growing in number a little bit, but I really, really think that we're growing closer to each other a lot. I really believe that. And I think that we've got the ingredients that they had. But I think we need to reach deep down in our heart, in our soul, and really think about what is motivating us in life. What is motivating us? Is it our jobs? Is it our family? Is it money? Is it retirement? Is it things? Is it love for the world? What motivates us in life? Or is it the moment that we can gather together with our family? Is it being with God? Is it kind of like, are we kind of more like Abraham was, where he would go and worshiping God was just, it was like breathing. He just had to. It was just part of who he was. There's no place to worship here? Let's build an altar. Come on. So he built an altar and he worshiped God. He moved to another place in the land. And, oh no, he had to build an altar to worship God. It was just automatic. It was automatic. Can this be us? I think we can be encouraged by the devotion and the example that we see in this church that's 216 years old in the state of Alabama. Why can't we be that way? There's no reason that we can't. What we need to do is have devotion. 4 years ago when we started, you remember, we talked a lot about being devoted. It wasn't just because it sounded like something fun to talk about. It was because of this. Devotion is what makes us last. Devotion is what makes us strong. Devoted to God. Devoted to Jesus Christ. Devoted to His church, which is each of us. Devoted to one another. We need to really think about that. Can this be us? Can this church be us? Can we be devoted to the Lord? Of course we can. But what it's going to take is for us to put first things first. First things, the things of God first. That's what it takes. Can we have the courage that they had? Yeah, sure we can. As long as we don't love the Lord or love the world more than we love the Lord. Yeah, we can have courage. We can do this. Can we have perseverance? Can we have perseverance? Well, I mean, you know, to not have perseverance means that you grew tired of something. How do you grow tired of Jesus? How can you grow tired of one who gave his life for you? How can you grow tired of the most important thing in the world? Can we have their love for one another? Sure we can. I think that we do. I think that we do. We need to realize that Jesus, one of the last things he told us was to love one another. How can we not do that? Jesus himself asked us to love one another. Like I said, we've been together for 4 years. To some, it may not seem like that long. To others, it seems like, wow, it's only been 4 years? I don't know. You know, just kind of backtracking, we started at our house. We moved over to the American Legion building. We found that place. We actually, it's funny because when we were expanding, we were kind of outgrowing our house. I was pretty satisfied with us where we were, except that we were getting tight. So we thought, okay, well, let's go. And we actually looked at this building, and it wasn't available. They were selling it to a doctor or something, and it just wasn't available. So we went over there. The mayor offered that place, so we took it. Fixed it up. We did a lot of work. Everybody was involved. We did some painting and flooring and different things that we did. And we worked hard together. And then we left it. And then this came available. And we worked hard on this one. Painting and not to mention going to get to Atlanta and getting chairs and furniture and different. I mean, just a lot of stuff is going on, you know. We've worked together. It's been awesome. I've enjoyed every minute of it. Most minutes of it. Actually, every minute of it. I'm looking forward to the next 4. I'm looking forward to the next 216. I may not make it that far, but I'm looking forward to 216 years from now, being able to look down and saying, they're still going. They're still going. Can we do that? Can we do it? I want to encourage you this morning to put, for all of us, to put your devotion and your courage and your perseverance and your brotherly love put all of this into your spiritual life. It is so important, because without these ingredients, we won't make it. A couple of years from now, there'll be it'd just be empty. If we don't have these ingredients, I'm just saying, if we don't have this stuff in our hearts, in our spiritual lives, we won't make it. And we've got to do it together. It can't be one of us. It can't be 3 of us. It can't be 5 of us. It has to be all of us. All of us. And we have to work together. And when one has weak moments, the other ones pick up and take over. When one's sick, another one comes in and helps. You know, when some are having problems, we pray for them, we help them, we work together, and we do things as a family. That's what we're supposed to be. That's what the original church was. And that's what I like to think that we are, is the original church. Because that's what Jesus died for. And I hope in some small way that this will be encouraging you, so that that what we're building here will last. It'll last. And our kids can enjoy it as they grow up and be a part of it. And our grandkids can be a part of it. And our great-grandkids can be a part of it. And we can guide them and lead them. I still think about the story I read a long time ago, when John, the Apostle John, was really, really old, and he had been an elder at the church, and he had gotten to where he couldn't walk very well. And some of the young men would pick him up and carry him. And I just picture his shoulders up on these young men as they pick him up and carry him into church to worship God. And it said that when that happened, when they were carrying him in, these young men, he would kind of pat them on the shoulder and say, "Little children, love each other." Because that's what it takes. That's what it takes. So I'm going to say to you, little children, love each other. Love each other. Happy anniversary. I'm glad we made it this far. And I want you to really consider what we've been talking about. Please don't go out of here and just think, okay, whatever. Because this is what it takes. Because this is what God expects of us, okay? If there's anyone here this morning that needs the prayers of the church, if you need to come and request the strength of prayer, if you've got sin in your life that you need to repent of, or if you need to be baptized. And I think that everyone here that I'm looking at for the most part has been. But we want to work together, and we want to make this thing happen, and we want to make it happen for every individual here. And if I have failed anyone here, I want to know about it. Because I want to help. And it's not me. If any of us fails each other, it's a bad thing, right? We need to be there for each other. We need to be there to be each other's strength. And I know this sounds like a pep talk, and the only reason it sounds like a pep talk is because it is. That's what I want it to be. Kind of one of those pep talks, before the football game says, men, this is what you got to do. What you got to do. I remember Bear Bryant one time, and I'm kind of going off a little bit, but one time he said, what we need is 11 men out there doing their job. Whatever that job is, you do your job and you do it well. And they had a winning team, right? All we need is for each individual to do your job and to do it well. And we've already talked about what that job is. Being devoted, having courage, right? Having perseverance, and having love for one another. You do your job, and I'll benefit from that. If I do my job, you'll benefit from that. We'll benefit from each other. Let's just hold each other close and be God's church, the one that Jesus gave his life for. If we can help you or encourage you or build you up in any way, if you need the strength, if you need the prayers of the church, let it be known. Let's stand and sing.